Matthew Scarfo. He's a potentialist, optimist, superhuman. He's a coach, a training coach. He's a very, very impressive man. He's a follower of David Goggins. He's done the 40 miles in 48 hours. He coaches people in fitness. He's certified. He's decorated. Very, very impressive man. And he really talks about the importance of finding great coaching in fitness. Important keys are certification and to be insured. But we have a great conversation on some of the misinformation that's out there and just simple things that you can do just to be healthy, breathing. We talk about ice baths. We talk about, just general fitness. You're not going to believe how he can help and train people with just a roll of quarters and a can of paint. Matthew Scarfo, you're going to enjoy this conversation. I certainly did. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Sounds good. I am excited to talk to you, man. Thanks for doing this.
No, thanks for your perseverance, really.
I really appreciate it. How do you specifically discover what motivates people?
You got to figure out what makes them elated, and we've got to figure out what makes them angry. And I think that people generally have two motivations, right? Love or hate. And you got to figure out what kind of person they are. I mean, if they're motivated by anger, if they're motivated by feelings of distress and discomfort, then we go that way. If they're motivated by acceptance and feelings of love, then we shoot for that. But those are generally the two areas I think that most people find their motivation from.
And how do you discover that? Is there a questionnaire, or do you just talk, or you just kind of learn?
It's really through a process of the discovery is really in the conversation. I mean, I feel like when you ask somebody questions, unless you've got a really deep level of rapport with that person, they generally give you answers that are canned answers because they've probably answered those kinds of questions before. But if we can get them to talk, if we can get them to just discuss and have a conversation, then really in that conversation, there's a bunch of different nuances. There's a bunch of subtle hints that they drop. And, those are breadcrumbs, and you follow the breadcrumbs, and inevitably they end up telling you in a more natural and unscripted way of, what motivates them. You can usually tell when you talk to somebody, what kind of learner they are. Are they a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner by the words that they use, right? They'll say, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I feel what you're saying. Those usually give you a pretty good indicator. And likewise, they'll tell you, what they're trying to find in themselves by way of subtle nuances like that. And, you pursue them, and you see what they end up telling you. That usually people are very forthcoming with the truth, even when they're trying to hide the truth, if you can bring it out of them in a really organic way.
Based on what I've watched and heard from you, I'm going to say you motivate closer to love than hate. Am I wrong?
I do. I really do. And it's interesting. It's, I think it's counterintuitive for a lot of people just
Mm.
because of, first impressions that a lot of people make. They tend to think that, it's, that somebody that's got muscles and works out really hard and, does the things that I do and works out at the intensity in which I work out are usually fueled by feelings of anger and feelings of rage and feelings of hate. But it's often the case that, the bigger, more intense guys are the ones that have the softer spots and the bigger hearts, and those are the ones that are motivated more by love. We're really more comfortable in our own skin. It's the people that have complexes and inferiority complexes and issues of self-trust and self-realization. Those are the ones that are uncomfortable being soft and being loving and expressing feelings of compassion. And it's usually the big guys with the teddy bears, right? So yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and vulnerability and perhaps fatherhood has moved
Yes.
you closer to that in your case.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this light too bright, by the way?
No, no, I
Okay,
see you just fine. Yeah,
cool.
and I love your content. So Jocko and David Goggins, you did the 48 miles in 48 hours, Matt, and you chronicled the whole thing in video. It's great. What motivated you to do that? And just tell me about uh, what that was like.
So I did that a week after. So last year, coming up on the 1 year anniversary of it, last year I ran my first my first like sanctioned ultra run, and it was Children of the Cane down in Port Allen, Louisiana. And I got a DNF. I bailed about 71 miles into the 100-mile race, and I felt
Wow.
like shit. So, I mean, it's still an achievement nonetheless. I mean, it's the farthest I've ever run at one clip. But
By the way, DNF is did not finish for those listening.
yes.
Sorry.
So, no, that's fine. So, yeah, so I didn't finish it, and I felt real bad about it. And I needed redemption, and I needed redemption for me, because if I let it go at that, then,
Mm.
I don't know. I felt like I needed some sort of need to punish myself in some way, make myself pay for making the choice to stop. I didn't stop that race because I had to, right? I stopped that race because I wanted to. And I think many of us, I blogged about this, I think many of us quit things feeling like we're finished, but literally on the car ride home, we inevitably have a conversation with ourselves, which includes something like, I could have kept going. You could have kept going.
Mm.
You didn't have to stop. You only had another, whatever, 12 hours left to go. You could have finished that race. And I had that conversation in my head. And because it was more of a choice than anything, I said, you know what, I need to do something that sucks. And I need to do something that allows me to redeem myself in my own mind's eye. And I decided 6 days later to do the Goggins challenge, which is 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, comes out to 48 miles. And so I did it. And, you know, you go through the same mental processes during something relatively short, 48 hours, that you would through something that's protracted. You go
Mm.
through, this is easy, this is getting challenging, this is getting hard, you hit the wall, you find that wall, which is something that I've really embraced, is really looking for the hard part, trying to find that wall in order to blast through it, because that's really the test. That's what I'm looking for. And I found that just about halfway through, just about halfway through the Goggins challenge.
Hmm.
I found the wall that I was looking for. It was an opponent that I wanted to fight again, because I lost that fight during the ultra that I ran a week before. And I pushed through it. I knew to expect it. I knew that it would be nothing more than a head game, and I welcomed that. So, I went headlong right into it, and it was an interesting experience. Again, if we look at it just in terms of the steps that we take mentally when we're going into something that seems bigger than we are, and it seems like we expect it to be challenging. Doesn't matter if it's a 1 hour ordeal, that 1 hour can feel like weeks. And it doesn't matter if it's a week long ordeal, that week can feel like months, that we end up going through the same steps in our head. And I knew that the Goggins challenge would be a way for me to find that again. So I did it. It was great. It taught me what I kind of already knew about myself, and that is that, unless you're dead or literally physically unable to carry on, then they're just demons that we have to slay in our own mind. And I went looking for them, and I found them, and I slayed them that time. So interestingly, November 13th is the Children of the Cane Ultra again. I signed up for it down in Port Allen, Louisiana, and I'm going to do it. And I'm not going to not complete it unless I literally, factually, physically, and unable to carry on. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's amazing how you have these goals like that. I got really heavy a while ago, and doctor told me I was going to not see my daughters grow up, so I lost a lot of weight, and I did a bunch of triathlons. Now, I've never done them before, and I did some training, and the first one was grueling. And like yourself, I got to a certain point, I just, can I finish? Can I finish? And you just get rid of those thoughts and just keep focusing, uh, it's amazing what the human body can do, Matt. It's absolutely amazing. Let's talk about your coaching now. So, what has remote coaching done to your industry and yourself?
So with the lockdown, with the pandemic, it's changed the industry, and what I think it's done is it's created an environment where the industry where the quality of the information out there has been dramatically diluted, because now everybody's in front of their computer seeking out information that confirms their biases, right? Confirmation bias is a real thing. You could tell somebody something and we see this every day, that's scientifically proven, it's factual, but if it doesn't click with their preconceived notion of things, they continue to look for something as inaccurate and as false as it may be, that clicks with their preconceived notion of things. So it's really created an environment, the shutdown, where people are out there seeking the things that they want to hear in order to make them feel better about the decisions they know that they shouldn't be making. So, it's a challenge for a lot of coaches and for a lot of trainers that have been in the industry for quite some time, because with the consumer search for somebody that they feel fits them well or fits them best, they look for somebody that confirms their maybe ill-conceived notions of things. And it's harder for experienced and researched and studied individuals like myself to get out in front of the people and represent ourselves in a way that demonstrates our, for lack of a better word, superior knowledge in our area of expertise. So we're drowned out by the static online. I mean, I visit a few pages on Instagram and other social media where it almost seems as though they're on a mission to put out disinformation as it relates to health, fitness, nutrition, and so on. But people consume that and people believe it. And then when we engage in conversations online with people about the things that we know a lot about, they'll share a meme that looks like maybe an 8th grader made, or an infographic that is completely inaccurate. And they're like, well, what do you have to say about this? It's like, well, anybody can make pictures, anybody can draw stuff, anybody can put words on a page, but lacking the ability to contextualize our knowledge in a conversational format has made it extremely difficult, I think, for all coaches in all industries to get the right information in front of the right people, because the right people out there are seeking the information that suits them best. as far as they're concerned, which, it would require the least amount of change on their part. Because everybody wants to change, but nobody really wants to do the work in order to change. They would rather hear somebody say that they've been doing it right all this time and be able to
Right.
blame something else than to say, you know what, this whole paradigm that I've constructed in my head over the last 20, 30, 50, 60 years is founded on false precepts and is going to require me to walk this ball back to my own 5-yard line in order to run this play again. And that's difficult for a lot of people, myself included. So, I mean, in that regard, I think it's important just to remind people that, we can be wrong. We can be wrong for a very long time. And to accept the fact that maybe we've been searching for inaccuracies in the truth in order to find things that suit our predisposition for, choices and lifestyle changes, and to challenge those things. I mean, what if, it's important to ask ourselves, like, what if we've been wrong about this the whole time? And to be okay with the answer of, like, well, okay, perhaps we have been wrong about this the whole time. And what would be a small change that I could make that would have the greatest ROI? So getting out in front of the people that would benefit from our knowledge base most, and have meaningful, contextual, subjective, and relevant conversations with them about these things in a way that keeps them open to change, I think has been the greatest challenge for me in my coaching. I mean, it's also difficult. I mean, I'm a face-to-face person. I like shaking hands. I like having conversations. I like to see smiles that aren't digitally generated on a screen somewhere. And I think that most people respond best to that kind of interaction. But now that we're on we live in a 3D world, but it's presented to us in most cases, or at least relationship-wise, on a 2D screen, really takes the soul out of our interactions and makes it difficult to coach online. Because I might tell a client something that is absolutely one of the things that they need to do, but if they don't agree with it, they're going to look somewhere where they're going to find less accurate information that does agree with their constructs. And it's hard to battle that when it's over an email or over a text message or even on a video call. That's a challenge.
Just the truth is not always convenient is I think the theme there of what you said, and I agree.
Sure.
But just developing trust when you're not face to face is very difficult to do. Do you get a lot of clients, a lot of interest out of your geography, remotely? How does it work? Do you work out virtually together with them, or?
So I don't work out virtually. It's in my coaching, what I tell my clients, and I tell really the world, that it's the things that I do that allow me to do the things that I do. So the fact that I might do an hour worth of tire sledges, or I might run for the better part of a day, or take ice baths, or, do a lot of the things that people see me do online, though it's interesting and it's novel, those aren't the things that necessarily everybody needs to do. Those aren't things really that anybody necessarily needs to do. What we need to do is we need to focus on really the core tenets of our health and our wellness. And if we focus on those things, then that enables us to do anything. So getting out there and demonstrating that, if we take care of our gut health, that the nutrition kind of takes care of itself, that we don't necessarily need to count macros, though it's important to pay attention to them. I mean, I feel like if you're weighing your food out down to the gram of carbs, fats, and proteins, like, you're really overcomplicating something that doesn't have to be that complicated. Where if we focus on what's keeping the bacteria in our gut healthy, and we're keeping our gut health as optimized as we can, that you'll find that the macros kind of fall into place incidentally. And the same thing goes with breathing, right? The same thing goes with movement mechanics and movement economics. And the same thing goes with mind-body connection. Like, if we can focus on those 4 things, then we'll find that we're really optimized to do anything that we want to do, whether it's doing an Ironman or losing 30 pounds. Like, these things, they're never as complicated as we make them out to be. And we almost make them overcomplicated in order to be able to blame the complication of things when things don't go right. So I coach in those areas. I mean, I'm always happy, and I do this with clients where I'll do a video demonstration for them, or I'll have them walk around the gym with their phone on video call, and I'll watch them do their exercises, and I'll cue them through those things. But working out with my clients, I mean, that's not really a foundational aspect of my coaching. We can leave that up to, the group fitness instructors and the trainers that really don't. We could leave that up to the trainers that are more apt to show people what to do as opposed to teach people what to do.
It's interesting that what's the difference between a coach and a trainer?
That's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of debate about that. A coach, I think, kind of shows you where to look, and I think a trainer really shows you what to see. And with a coach, you lead them to water, but I think trainers kind of force you to drink. And not that there's anything wrong with that. When I focused more on one-on-one in-person training, there's a different level of intimacy with that. And there's also a different level of interaction with that. Whereas with coaching, it's more like coaching is more teaching. It's more persuading, and it's easier to coach from and it's easier to coach from a distance than it is to train from a distance, because my kind of training, I do a lot of hands-on stuff. I do a lot of manual therapies and stretching and cueing, tactile cueing and things like that. It's impossible to do over a screen. So coaching is really more, I would say, like, NASCAR and race car drivers, they're being coached from their pit. If they were being trained, they would have another racer or another driver sitting next to them, kind of telling them and showing them what to do. Whereas from the sidelines, they're really being more instructed of the things to look for, the things to seek, the things to, explore, as opposed to what in fact they're looking to find. Right. So if I was training you, I would go through, every exercise, every repetition, every movement, and then, make it more and more meta up until we're looking at the overall workout. Where with coaching, it's more explaining the purpose of a program and how to tell the clients how to guide the clients to kind of find those things that they're looking for, as opposed to showing them step by step that, this is how we need to do it.
It's fascinating to me. I think in the business world, we say coaching, and it's trying to bring someone or organization to the next level. And I have discussions often about the differences between leadership and management in the business world. And I think you just defined it, Matt. I think leadership is more coaching and management is more training.
I think that's a perfect analog for it. Actually, as you were talking about that, I was smiling because I made that same connection in my head. I think you're right. I think you're exactly right.
So really, training would be more difficult to do remotely.
Yeah. I mean, as far as my understanding of it is, in the way that I would implement my training strategies, yeah, it's nearly impossible to do remotely.
Very interesting. You have a great video where you talk about the two most important questions to ask a trainer or a coach: certification and insurance. Please elaborate on that. It's a very important point.
So in the fitness space, interestingly, this has been a huge hair I've had across my ass for quite some time, is that you don't need to be certified or licensed or credentialed to represent yourself as a personal trainer or a certified personal trainer. And that's extremely confusing for the consumer. That's extremely confusing for the public at large, because my daughter can go get a business card. She's 9 years old. She can get a business card right now that says certified personal trainer on it. And there's she could do that. I mean, there's no concept. Yeah. There's no, she doesn't get in trouble for that. And the consumer doesn't know any better, because the consumer thinks that there's got to be some governing body in charge of determining who can do that and what they can do. When in fact, the fitness industry is a self-governed industry. It's always been, but the fitness industry is a self-governed industry. And if you're not certified, then you haven't passed you haven't demonstrated that you've got a minimal aptitude, or at least you've satisfied the requirements for a minimum standard of proficiency in what you do. Insurance is different, tax is different, law is different, medicine is different. But in personal training, when we can do just as much damage as a bad doctor can, then I think it's important that your fitness professional has a license that demonstrates that they have a minimal aptitude and that they've continued their education and maintained their credentials and their ability to represent themselves as being legitimate in what they do. And if your trainer is not insured or your fitness professional is not insured, then God forbid something bad happens to you, you have no recourse. So, this presents itself as potentially having a trainer who is not credentialed, has not been able to demonstrate a minimal aptitude at what they're representing they can talk about. And then in that practice, if they end up hurting somebody, then you're not insured. I mean, you might as well just find somebody off the street that's read a couple of books and says they know what they're talking about, and putting your physical and physiological health and safety in their hands, expecting that they've got everything that they need necessary in order to protect you in the event that they're not, something averse goes wrong, but also that they've demonstrated some ability that those of us out there that do pursue continuing education and that do pursue our own curiosities and seeking answers and spending the money and investing our time and our energy into maintaining our certifications do. And when I owned my businesses, hiring trainers was the hardest thing, and I'm not the only person out there that thinks this. It's one of the hardest things in the world to do, because you could put an ad out there saying you're seeking certified trainers. You get somebody in there, you interview them, and you ask them for a copy of their certification. And frankly, this isn't an understatement. At least 70% of the time, they'd say, "Oh yeah, about that. I didn't renew my certification. I was certified, but I'm not certified any longer." It's like, well, what are you even doing here? Like, I only hire certified trainers. My customer base, my clientele, they expect that I'm a fiduciary for them. And if I'm not looking out for them, then I put myself at risk. So I think it's critical that everybody out there who works with a fitness professional ask their fitness professional if they're certified, and take nothing less than a yes for an answer, and then follow that up with, are you insured? I mean, you wouldn't hire a plumber to come and work on your furnace unless they were licensed to be a plumber and unless they were insured in case something went wrong. But we're putting people in charge of our heart and our breathing and our nutrition and everything else where we haven't asked those same questions. And in which case I'd respond like, isn't your body a little bit more important than your furnace? But we take more care to make sure that the people that we contract to work on our homes are more legitimate than the people that we contract to work on our health. And that's like, that can be a slippery slope for a lot of people.
And if the trainer or physical, like yourself, you're a coach, is certified, are there specific certifications that people should seek out for them?
There are, and I don't want to endorse any particular ones necessarily. I mean, for me, I'm an NASM certified trainer. Most of my certifications are current. All of my certifications are current, and most of them are through NASM. I think that they're a fantastic organization. There's a number of other fantastic organizations out there, a number of them, but there's also a minimum requirement in order to be able to identify yourself as a personal trainer or a certified personal trainer or fitness professional. And you can go and get one for $49. You could take the online test, which is an open book test. I'm not going to mention which organization this is, but for less than $100, you can be certified as a personal trainer, taking an open book test and not pay, actually, unless you pass that test. So you're guaranteed to pass a cheap and just not reputable training certification, and be able to demonstrate yourself as a certified personal trainer. So I would buyer beware, and it does take a certain amount of research on the consumer's part to find out through which organization your fitness professional is certified. Looking that organization up and checking, does it require continuing education in order for maintenance of that certification? And furthermore, is your trainer certified? I mean, if a trainer spent $49 on a training certification, chances are they're not spending the extra few $100s there that they would need in order to protect themselves from liability. So, ask questions. Ask the same questions that you would if you were hiring somebody to do electric in your house. I mean, these are important things, especially when it comes to our own body. And, we can screw ourselves up. You've got people out there that aren't qualified, that are making nutritional recommendations, that are making other recommendations for exercise and so on and so forth. So, make sure that you've got somebody that knows what they're talking about, that just doesn't say, I know what I'm talking about, trust me. I mean, there takes a certain amount of diligence on our part in order to ensure that we're keeping ourselves safe.
Perhaps one good thing about the remote coaching is that hopefully it's weeding out some of these people, because now people aren't restricted to their geography. They can go further out and find higher qualified people.
I think that it certainly opens up the landscape for the legitimate ones out there, but I think it makes it harder, though, generally, that we're consuming a lot of our information from social media pages and other sources online that aren't curated by somebody who knows what they're doing. So again, just make sure that you've got to do a little bit of work on your part as a consumer to make sure that the information you're getting comes from somebody who should be giving you that information.
How important is breathing to exercise?
Critical. I mean, if you can't breathe, you can't. If you can't breathe, you can't breathe. It's absolutely critical, and proper breathing, furthermore, is even more important than anything. Basically. So it has everything to do with metabolic efficiency. It has everything to do with managing our stress state, managing our overall health. You can't drive a car unless you've got a proper intake on it, and you can't operate this machine unless you're properly aspirating yourself. So it's critical. Number one.
You've got great videos. It walks you through, show what your stomach should look like. But, you do a really, really great job, Matt, of explaining that and what you should do. I found myself repeating that quite often and learning a lot from that. Are you familiar with Wim Hof?
I am familiar with Wim Hof.
His exercising, his breathing exercises are a little bit different, but similar. But he just kind of wants you to breathe. Doesn't matter through nose or mouth. But you're a little bit of a different advocate as far as that's concerned. You prefer the nose. And
I think that it's all a means to the same end, actually. So there's many different types of breathing, many different strategies, many different tactics. I don't believe that Wim thinks that his method is an end all and to it. So he practices more of a Tumo type breathing, which, for a poor example, would be the monks at the mountains of Tibet would go out there and keep themselves from freezing, and also affect their physiology in certain ways. So, to achieve what his type of breathing technique achieves, it doesn't matter if it's in through the nose or in through the mouth. I mean, he says it doesn't matter what hole it goes into, just get it in there.
Right.
Because for him, it's a matter of increasing the amount of oxygen in our blood, decreasing the amount of carbon dioxide in our blood to achieve a certain effect. And that certain effect has its application for many different reasons in many different ways. For when I talk about in through the nose and out through the nose and breathing cadence and breathing technique, it's really more the application of that type of breathing is more for athletic performance and general health. You couldn't walk around all day doing Wim Hof style breathing, and you just couldn't. It would be impossible. You'd probably die, actually, or become very sick. So, it's not something that you would do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, my type of breathing is really more for metabolic economy, metabolic efficiency, and ensuring that we can endure as long as we possibly can in a way that is most healthful and most conducive for just a general overall healthful state. So I do practice Wim Hof breathing. I do practice it intermittently throughout the day for certain reasons, and I think that it certainly has its reasons, and it's you can't discount its affectability of certain conditions in our body and reducing stress and increasing performance in certain ways. I just talk more about breathing in a holistic kind of way as opposed to a prescriptive kind of way.
Do you meditate, Matt?
I do.
And do you marry specific breathing with it when you do that?
I do. And Wim Hof type breathing, I do during certain meditations. Restful breathing, which would be more like Patrick McEwen talks a lot about it. He's a fantastic scientist and a fantastic author. I consume a lot of his content, and James Nestor as well. James Nestor is more of a researcher and a editorialist and a writer than a scientist, but that man sure knows a whole hell of a lot of what he's talking about. But I do practice. I do meditate. I do it to find different states of consciousness and to affect my physiology in certain ways. And depending on the order of the day, I'll implement different kinds of breathing techniques.
Yeah, I like to also follow Andrew Huberman.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's
another great guy.
So it's amazing to me just how it's free, Matt. I mean, we could breathe, right, and meditate. It doesn't cost a thing, and it's just I get to talk to a lot of extraordinary people, and everybody meditates. It's just so simple. Breathing properly and just meditating will help so much in life. I just wish more people would do it, and it's free, like I said, and not very taxing on your body. Ice baths. Love sitting there watching the video of you in those ice baths and the outside, and that's Wim Hof is another ice bath person, isn't he? By the way, I'm on the 60-day cold shower challenge with him, and I'm up to about 2.5 minutes. Certainly not an ice bath, but I'll get there. But it's invigorating, isn't it?
It's great. And I'm going to tell you that if you can do it for 60 days, you can do it forever. I mean, if you can do it for 2 weeks, you can do it forever. In the last 3 or 4 months, maybe I've taken 3 or 4 warm showers. I enjoy it. I mean, it's just like anything else, and similar to the Goggins challenge that we mentioned before, or ultra marathons, or anything that we can classify as an endurance type of activity. So 60-day ice bath challenge, that's an endurance type of activity. You're going to hit the same mental wall that you would hit during that than you would doing a marathon or an ultra marathon or something that's got, some sort of bow shock to it, where, you get to a point where it really sucks, and now you've really got to put your nose to the grindstone and get through it. And then once you get through it, it's almost like, flat open seas with following winds and everything else. So yeah, I love it. For me, it was Wim Hof that got me into the ice baths. I mean, he got me into the breath work and the cold water immersion. And my interest in that's really grown from there. But there's something to it, and there's certainly something to the meditative applicability of it as well. I mean, when you get into a bath, and I'm not an ice bath ninja like a lot of people out there. I haven't cracked a hole in a frozen lake yet and jumped in. That's hopefully coming this year, but I just haven't had the opportunity or the inclination to get there. I'm working my way there. The coldest bath I've taken so far is about 38 degrees, and that's freaking cold.
Yes.
And you've got to find a place in your head when you do that, and breathing certainly helps, but you've got to meditate. You've got to find a spot in your head, open some door in there to get you to a place where you're not paying attention to the outside world, and that your body's actually not responding to the cold in a way that you would expect it to. What's interesting, and I think I've got a video on YouTube about this, where I was measuring my heart rate variability just before getting into the ice bath, getting into the ice bath, and then getting out of the ice bath. And what you can see is an immediate drop in my heart rate. And I don't remember exactly the number. It's always significant. But the second we get into water, my heart rate probably dropped 30, 40 beats per minute just from getting into the water right away. So our bodies are accustomed to, or have evolved into adapting to those cold water environments where oxygen is rationed, and our physiology adapts in such a way where it enables us to maintain our function in an environment such as that. James Nestor, speaking of, wrote a great book called Deep, that talks a lot about that. Talks a lot about free diving and what happens to our bodies and our breathing when we go underwater. But I mean, ice baths. It's for me, it's a moment of momentary salvation when I get in that water. And what I tell myself is that it's just cold on the outside. And then when I get in that water, it's only my skin that's cold. It's not my body that's cold. It's only my skin. It could be below zero outside, but it's just the walls of the house that are freezing cold. It's not the rooms inside. So it's one of my mantras, more or less, when I get into the water, is that it's just cold on the outside. It's not cold in here. And it seems to work, and I love it. And it's got great therapeutic effects, great for recovery. It's great as an impetus for meditation, because you can't get into a freezing cold bath and not feel like you've got to focus on something else in order to maintain being in that water for any length of time. So yeah, I love it. It's probably my greatest find next to breathing in the last 10 or 15 years would be cold water immersion.
And the reports and the studies that are coming out, like you say, the healing properties and the extreme benefits that we get. And again, relatively no cost. You take a cold shower, put some ice in a bath. It's amazing to me. I mean, when we come to nutrition, unfortunately, buying organics and things like that can get expensive, right? But these kinds of things
Absolutely.
here, it's just everybody can do it. Speaking of inexpensive, how can you start a workout with someone with a roll of quarters and a can of paint?
I don't know how you came across that. That's one of my favorite lines, actually. So
I
when
know it
somebody says
is.
they need to find, I don't have any money for equipment. I can't work out. I can't find anything. Equipment's been hard to come by during the pandemic. I always tell them, I said, you don't need, in order to train a client, I need a roll of quarters and a can of paint, and I can whoop anybody's ass. Because I think the simplest answer to that is that, so when we talk about our core, I think that many people define core in an improper way. Okay, so as fitness professionals, we define core as your lumbopelvic hip complex. Okay, it's roughly 36 muscles, a whole bunch of structures. It goes anywhere from our lumbar vertebrae to our hips, right? So our lumbar spine, our pelvis, and our hip complex. All of the muscles and structures and architecture that make up those three areas combined, that's generally our core. So every exercise is a core exercise if we do it right. And I get some pushback on this from people. What about a preacher curl, right? It's all a core exercise. And if we can focus on our core when we're doing anything, it doesn't matter whether we're putting our seatbelt on, we're getting up out of a chair, we're standing on line at the store, like all movement begins and ends at that interstitial area that is our core. I mean, it connects our shoulder girdle to our hips, it connects our hips to our feet, and it connects our feet to the ground. So if you don't have a strong core, you might have strong legs, but your upper body is not able to transmit the energy and the forces that it can create through this interstitial area into our hips and into the ground. So the secret to core exercise or core engagement, functional core strength, functional core ability is focusing on being immovable no matter what we're doing. Okay, so being immovable, being stable. If you're standing on line, for example, the most innocuous and benign kind of activity, if you're standing on line at the store and you were to try to find a body position or posture where if somebody were to walk by you at any moment and bump into you, that you wouldn't react violently to that force and fall over or lose your balance, you would find that your chest is proud, your shoulders are back, your hips are neutral, and that you've got some baked in tension in this area between our shoulders and our hips, right? So we've got some tension in this core area, and in performing that benign and motionless activity of just standing there in a way that secures us to our foundation, which is the ground, that's a functional core activity, and that's you're using your core in a way in which it was intended. So when you're doing your preacher curl, granted, your ass is planted to a seat, the back of your arms is planted to a cambered pad, and that you've got many points of contact. But how would you be able to perform that exercise in a way where if somebody were to come over and try to push you off of your seat while you're performing that exercise, if you were to engage your core in such a way where you were immovable during those moments, then you're engaging your core in a functional way. So engage your core in that way where nobody would be able to come over and push you off of your foundation while you're reaching down to the floor to tie your shoelaces. That's all that you need. It's all that you need is that concentration and that focus on that area to build enough tension so that way you're immovable. And that goes for bench press. That goes for running. That goes for tire sledges. That goes for everything. So every exercise, every movement, any time that we are standing up, sitting down, or doing anything is an opportunity for us to use our core in which it was intended. When we release that tension and we get lazy and we deactivate that area, then we allow for certain movement asymmetries to begin to accumulate. We allow for certain postural distortions to accumulate. We allow for, our shoulders to slouch and our hips to rotate in improper ways and our feet to plant on the floor in improper ways. So I could put a roll of quarters on the floor and tell you to pick it up while standing on one foot. But if I were to have you bake into your core all of the tension necessary where it would be harder than otherwise for me to push you off of your foot, that's a core exercise, and that's really all I would need. So, every exercise is a core exercise if you perform it right. And for that matter, we can shit can our crunches, our sit-ups, our leg raises, and any other core exercise that people do, because those aren't core exercises. You can't single out one or two muscles out of this system of 30 some odd muscles and say that you're working the entire thing. I mean, you're basically training your body to tighten these areas over time while training your body to inhibit the opposite areas over a certain amount of time, and you bake in certain postural deformations and distortions. So it's critical that we get rid of all of the ab exercises that we do and begin to treat every exercise that we do as though it were an ab exercise.
Very interesting. It is fascinating how core just gets tossed around so often. Everything. Yeah. It's just, and you've got you mentioned sitting, you've got a great blog on when you're sitting at a desk, at your desk job, what you can do to help exercise there. You've got great insight on those things. I really, really enjoy that. So we often talk. I mentioned before I lost a lot of weight, and people always ask me, how'd you lose weight? And I said, well, discipline. I just focused and they want some magic quick answer. So how important is, two questions, is discipline in your coaching method, and how important is it for the student or the client to exercise discipline or self-discipline?
I mean, it's critical, and for some people, doing the right things comes easy, and I think that motivation is the exponent there. So if you're motivated, but you're not disciplined, you're going to build that discipline because you're inspired to do so for whatever reasons. But if you can't keep going when the going gets tough, then you're missing out on everything that happens when things begin to get uncomfortable. And that's really when change happens in any way, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual. It's the reps that suck. It's the last few reps of a set where your body's going to adapt the most to. Because otherwise you're just working on efficiency and economy. You're getting better at doing things until they start to get hard. You're not getting better at doing things when they get hard. or after they get hard. So having the discipline to maintain your bearing and to maintain your efforts when things begin to get challenging, that's where we forge new ground. That's where we shine a light and where the shadows exist, and that's where our horizon becomes greater and greater, and we're able to see more, identify more, and achieve more. So discipline is, I mean, it's without discipline you've got nothing. Without discipline you're not even getting out of bed in the morning. So you've got to have some baseline level of it in order to do just about anything. But it's trainable. You know, the more that you do things that suck, the better you get at doing things that suck. And the more willing you are to do them, because you understand that, you know, it's physical difficulty, emotional, spiritual difficulty are much like our tolerance to those things are like our tolerance to temperature. You know, why in the summertime do we turn the thermostat down to 64 degrees, but in the wintertime we turn the thermostat up to 68 degrees? Like, wouldn't 64 degrees be good all year round? Wouldn't 68 degrees be good all year round? So it's contextual, it's subjective, and it's trainable. So by training our tolerance to things, whether it's exercise or it's cold, or it's our tolerance to things that suck and doing them more and more when we know that it gets harder and harder, I think that helps build discipline, as long as we don't forget that about ourselves either. You know, it's easy to say that we're disciplined in one area, but we're not disciplined in another, where I think that discipline is really more of an undercurrent that affects everything in our lives, and we need to be able to identify it as such. So if you're disciplined at reading, it's that same discipline that you should use for just about anything else. It's that same internal conversation. It's that same internal equation that we use when we plug it in and we want to get something done that we enjoy. And if it's a matter of perception, we really just have to talk ourselves into understanding that discipline is discipline. You know, nutritional discipline is no different than exercise discipline. We're labeling it slightly differently, but it's the same exact thing. But discipline is critical.
Yeah, I know when I do my workouts and I'm on some of those last reps, I'm saying to myself, this will be the hardest thing I do all day, you know, and you just
Yeah.
use it and you motivate it and you move on. And I get a lot of pushback from people about discipline, and I don't think it's the only thing. I think it's one of many things that you need. You need compassion, you need discipline, you need motivation, but I think it's an essential ingredient. I really love what you do, Matthew Scarfo. I really, really do. You're inspirational, and that one of the best things I learn about you, and I've learned about you, is that when you speak and even when you write, um, you have confidence, but it never ever does it go into arrogance. It's always confidence. And unfortunately I see that sometimes in your industry, and that's probably not a surprise to you, but I never see that with you. And I love it. And I think it works well for you, and I love what you do. Please tell us how we can get in touch with you, how we can, your website, every way that we can get in touch with you, so we can look for you and ask you questions and perhaps hire you for services.
Sure, and I really appreciate I appreciate those remarks. Probably more than you know. I think that confidence is important. Otherwise, people just aren't going to believe you. But I also I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and it's important for me to stay in my lane. And I make every effort to ensure that I do stay in my lane. I don't want to talk about something that I don't know much about confidently, because that's a lie. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you saying that it doesn't come across as arrogance either, because everything that I say and everything that I do is really done with compassion and empathy. And again, there's probably one of the nicest things I've heard in a long time. So thank you. You go to my website, mattscarfo.com, mattscarfo.com. I'm at Matt Scarfo just about everywhere. Instagram is really more of a photo journal for me. That's where I put most of my content up. So you can find me on Instagram. YouTube would be /C/Matt Scarfo. But if you just Googled Matt Scarfo, I mean, you're going to find me. I think there's only 3 of us in the country. And, you know, we all do very different things. So I don't think you'll have much of a problem finding me there either.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. I enjoy your content. I enjoy you, and you inspire me, and I know you do others. Thanks so much. I hope one day we get to meet face to face.
Thank you, sir. Me too. Much appreciated.
You be well.
You too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.